Maggie Hale's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood outside the church doors in Red Creek, Colorado, summer heat pressing down like a punishment from God. And she could hear them laughing. Every single one of them. Her wedding dress strained at the seams, sweat rolling down her neck, and the cruelest voice carried through the open window. "She'll split that dress before she reaches the altar." She almost turned around, almost ran. Then a child's voice cut through the ugliness like a bell. "She's beautiful, Daddy. That's my mama." If you want to know what happened next, subscribe to my channel, follow this story to the very end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Maggie Hale gripped the doorframe of that church so hard her knuckles went white. She could feel every eye in Red Creek burning through the wood before she even stepped inside. The laughter hadn't stopped. It had gotten louder. Someone in the back pew whispered something, and 3 women covered their mouths at the same time. She knew what they were saying. She'd heard it her whole life.
"Lord have mercy, Caleb Turner really went and did it."
"That ain't a bride. That's a barn door in silk."
"How's he going to carry her over the threshold without breaking his back?"
Maggie closed her eyes. Her chest was so tight she thought her ribs might crack. The dress, the only one the seamstress in Ridgemont would agree to make, pulled across her stomach and bunched under her arms. She'd paid double. The seamstress had charged her double and still whispered to her assistant while taking measurements. She remembered that, too. She remembered everything. Every look. Every turned head. Every man who glanced at her and then looked past her like she was furniture. Every woman who smiled politely and then laughed the moment Maggie's back was turned. 31 years of remembering, and now she was supposed to walk down that aisle like none of it mattered. "Miss Hale?" The voice came from behind her. Reverend Calloway stood at the bottom of the church steps, hat in hand, squinting up at her in the July heat. "They're waiting on you, ma'am." Maggie didn't move.
"I know they are,"
she said quietly. "You all right?"
"No, Reverend. I ain't all right."
He climbed 2 steps and stopped. He was a thin man, careful with words, and he looked at her the way people look at a horse about to bolt. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Ain't nobody gonna fault you for walking away."
"Everybody in that church would fault me," Maggie said. "And they'd enjoy it."
Calloway didn't argue. He knew she was right. Inside, the murmuring swelled. Maggie heard a child's voice rise above the noise, bright, impatient, clear as creek water. "When's she comin', Papa? You said she was comin'." That was Lucy. Lucy Turner. 7 years old. Missing her front tooth. Wild brown hair that wouldn't stay braided, no matter how many times Caleb tried. Maggie had only met her twice. Once at the general store, when Lucy had stared at her for a full minute without blinking, then said, "You're real big." Not mean, just honest. The way children are before the world teaches them to be cruel. The second time was at the Turner Ranch, when Caleb had invited her for supper to discuss the arrangement. Lucy had climbed into Maggie's lap without asking, looked up at her, and said, "Your lap is better than Papa's. His is all bony." Caleb had turned red. Maggie had laughed, a real laugh, loud and sudden, the kind she hadn't made in years. That laugh was the reason she was standing here now. Not because Caleb Turner was handsome. He was, in a rough, sun-damaged, doesn't-know-it kind of way. But that wasn't why. Not because she had options. She didn't. A mail-order bride advertisement in the Rocky Mountain Gazette had brought her here. One of 11 responses Caleb received. He'd chosen her after a single letter. She still didn't fully understand why. She was here because of that laugh. Because for one moment, sitting in a stranger's kitchen with a child on her lap, she had felt like a person instead of a problem. "Miss Hale," Calloway said again, softer now. "The heat's fierce. We ought to move inside." Maggie wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. Her fingers were trembling. "Reverend, can I ask you something?" "Of course,"
When you look at me, what do you see?" He hesitated. "I see a woman standing in front of a church on her wedding day." "That ain't what I asked." Calloway sighed. He looked at the ground, then back at her. "I see a woman who's scared," he said honestly. "And I see a woman who showed up anyway." Maggie nodded slowly. That was enough. That was as close to kindness as she was going to get today. She pushed off the doorframe. She walked in. The church went quiet the way a room goes quiet when something breaks. Not silence, the absence of noise. Every conversation stopped mid-word. Every fan stopped mid-wave. Every head turned. Maggie felt the weight of it. Not just her body, though God knew that was heavy enough, but the weight of their judgment. It pressed on her shoulders, her chest, the back of her neck. It made her spine want to curl. She didn't let it. She walked forward. One step, two. The floorboards creaked under her, and someone in the third row snickered. A woman, Helen Pratt, wife of the feed store owner, leaned toward her neighbor and said something behind her gloved hand. Both women smiled. Maggie saw it. She kept walking. Caleb Turner stood at the altar. He was wearing his only good shirt, white, pressed, too tight across the shoulders. His jaw was set. His eyes were fixed on Maggie, and his expression was impossible to read. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just watched her come. Beside him, Lucy bounced on her toes, grinning so wide her missing tooth showed. She was wearing a blue dress with a ribbon that was already coming untied, and she was the only person in that church who looked happy. Maggie was halfway down the aisle when it happened. Roy Beckman, cattle buyer, town loudmouth, 3 whiskeys deep before noon, leaned into the aisle and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope that altar's reinforced, Caleb." Laughter. Not quiet. Not hidden. Open, rolling, ugly laughter that filled the church like smoke. Maggie stopped. Her whole body went still. Her eyes burned, her throat closed. She thought, turn around, walk out, get on the next stage to anywhere. This was a mistake. This was always going to be a mistake. Then Lucy Turner broke free from her father's side. The little girl ran down the aisle, boots clacking on wood, and grabbed Maggie's hand with both of hers. "She's beautiful, Papa," Lucy said, loud and clear, looking back at Caleb. "That's my mama." The laughter died. Not slowly, not gradually. It died the way a fire dies when you throw dirt on it. Sudden, complete, and a little bit shameful. Maggie looked down at Lucy. The child stared up at her with brown eyes that held absolutely no doubt. No hesitation. No pity. Just certainty. Maggie's vision blurred. She blinked hard. She would not cry in this church. She would not give them that. Lucy tugged her hand. "Come on, Papa's waitin'." Maggie walked. Lucy held her hand the entire way. When they reached the altar, Caleb stepped forward. He didn't look at the town. He didn't acknowledge the silence or the shame hanging in the air like gunpowder. He looked at Maggie. He extended his hand. Not soft, not gentle. The way a man extends his hand when he's making a decision and daring anyone to question it. "Ma'am," he said. Maggie took his hand. His grip was rough, calloused, steady. She could feel his pulse, or maybe that was hers. "Mr. Turner," she whispered. "Let's get this done," he said. Not romantic, not tender, but firm, certain, like he was hammering a fence post and didn't intend for it to move. Reverend Calloway cleared his throat and opened his Bible. The ceremony was short. Caleb said his vows without looking away from Maggie's face. His voice didn't waver once. Maggie said hers with her hands shaking,
and her voice cracking on the word honor. When Calloway said, "You may kiss the bride," Caleb paused. He looked at Maggie. He tilted his head just slightly, as if asking permission. She gave a small nod. He stepped forward, put one hand on her shoulder, not her waist, not her hip, nothing that would feel like a performance, and kissed her forehead. Lucy clapped. Nobody else did. They walked out of that church as husband and wife, Lucy between them, holding both their hands. The town watched them go. Nobody threw rice. Nobody cheered. The women on the church steps whispered to each other, and the men looked at Caleb like he'd lost his mind. Roy Beckman spat in the dirt as they passed. 6 months, he said to his buddy. She'll eat him out of house and home. Caleb heard him. Maggie knew because his hand tightened around hers, just for a second, just enough to feel. But he didn't turn around. Neither did she. They climbed onto the wagon. Caleb lifted Lucy onto the bench seat first, then offered his hand to Maggie. She took it, stepped up, and the wagon groaned under her weight. She heard it. Everyone heard it. She sat down and stared straight ahead. Caleb picked up the reins. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Maggie said. He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth moved, just a fraction. "Good," he said. "Neither am I." He drove the wagon out of town, and Maggie Hale, now Maggie Turner, watched Red Creek shrink behind her like a wound she was leaving open. The Turner Ranch sat 4 miles east of town, pressed against the base of a long ridge. It was a working spread, cattle mostly, some chickens, a garden that had gone half wild since Caleb's wife died 2 years ago. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and sat there for a moment without moving. Lucy had fallen asleep between them, her head on Maggie's arm. The child's weight was light, almost nothing, but Maggie hadn't moved her arm for the entire ride. Her shoulder ached, and she didn't care. "She don't sleep easy," Caleb said quietly, looking at his daughter. "Not since her mama passed. Takes her hours most nights." Maggie looked at the sleeping girl. "She fell asleep in 10 minutes. "I know." Caleb's voice was strange, tight, like he was holding something back. "That's what I'm telling you." He climbed down, walked around, and lifted Lucy without waking her. He held the child against his chest with one arm and extended his free hand to Maggie again. "I can manage," she said, and climbed down on her own. The wagon rocked. She landed heavily, and dust rose around her boots. Caleb watched her, but said nothing. He carried Lucy inside. Maggie followed. The house was clean but bare. A table, 4 chairs, a stove, a rocking chair by the window with a blanket folded over the back. A woman's touch had been here once. Maggie could see it in the curtains, in the dried wildflowers still sitting in a jar on the shelf, in the small photograph on the mantel. She looked at the photograph. A woman, thin, pretty, smiling. Dark hair. Lucy's eyes. Caleb came back from the bedroom. He saw where Maggie was looking. "That's Sarah," he said. "Lucy's mother." Maggie nodded. She didn't ask him to take it down. She wouldn't. "She was beautiful," Maggie said. She was. Silence filled the room. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. The kind of silence between 2 people who don't know each other, but are now supposed to share a life. "I put Lucy down," Caleb said. "She'll sleep a while." "Good." He stood near the stove, arms folded. Maggie stood near the door. The distance between them was maybe 10 feet, but it felt like a canyon. "I should say something," Caleb started. "You don't have to." "I reckon I do." He unfolded his arms, then folded them again, like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "I ain't good with words, Mrs. Turner. Never have been. Sarah used to say I'd rather talk to cattle than people, and she wasn't wrong." Maggie waited. "I chose you," he said.
Out of 11 letters, I chose yours. I know. I've been wondering why. He looked at her directly. His eyes were gray, steady, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Because you didn't lie, he said. Every other woman wrote about how pretty they were, how good they could cook, how much they loved children. You wrote, he paused, remembering, I am a large woman with no family, no prospects, and no illusions. I can work hard and I don't complain. If that's enough, I'll come. Maggie felt her face burn. She remembered writing that letter at a boarding house table in Kansas City, with 17 cents to her name and nowhere left to go. I figured a woman who'd write that was either honest or desperate, Caleb said. I was both. I know. He nodded slowly. So was I. Something shifted in the room. Not warmth, not yet, but the canyon between them narrowed, just a little. There's a room for you, Caleb said, off the kitchen. It was Sarah's sewing room. I cleared it out. Put a bed in there. Thank you. I don't expect... He stopped, cleared his throat, started again. This arrangement. It's for Lucy. She needs a mother. I need help with the ranch. I won't ask more than that. I understand, Mr. Turner. Caleb. He nodded once, sharp, like they'd signed a contract. I'll tend the horses, he said, and walked out. Maggie stood alone in the kitchen. She looked at the photograph on the mantel. Sarah Turner, thin and beautiful, and dead. She looked at the dried flowers. She looked at the chair by the window, where a woman used to sit. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach, the stomach that had been mocked an hour ago in front of the whole town, and breathed. She was married. She was in a stranger's house. She was 4 miles from a town that hated her. And a little girl with a missing tooth had called her beautiful. Maggie sat down at the kitchen table. She folded her hands. She stared at nothing. Then she stood up, took off her wedding dress in the sewing room, put on a plain work dress, and walked outside. Caleb was in the barn, brushing down the horses. He looked up when she appeared. "What are you doing?" he asked. "What needs doing?" He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pointed to a pile of firewood that needed splitting. "That." "All right." "You ever split wood before?" "No." "It ain't easy." "Neither is walking down an aisle while 40 people laugh at you, Mr. Turner. Hand me the axe." He handed her the axe. She split wood until her arms burned and her palms blistered, and the sun began to drop toward the ridge. She wasn't good at it. She was slow, and the axe was heavy, and more than once the log just fell off the stump, and she had to set it up again. But she didn't stop. Caleb came out twice to check on her. The first time he said nothing. The second time he brought her water. "You're gonna hurt yourself," he said. "Probably." "You don't have to prove nothing." Maggie drove the axe into the stump and looked at him. Her face was red. Sweat ran down her temples. Her hands were raw. "Yes, I do," she said. "Not to you. To myself." He held the cup of water toward her. She took it, drank it all, and handed it back. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome, Mrs. Turner." "Maggie." He nodded. "Maggie." He walked back to the barn. Maggie picked up the axe. Behind her, through the kitchen window, Lucy's face appeared. Small hands pressed against the glass, watching the big woman who'd married her papa swing an axe like she was fighting something only she could see. Lucy smiled. Then she went to find her blue ribbon, because tomorrow she wanted Maggie to braid her hair, and she reckoned she'd better be ready. That night, after supper, beans and cornbread that Caleb had made because Maggie admitted she burned most things she cooked, they sat on the porch in silence. Lucy was asleep inside, clutching the blue ribbon. The sky was enormous, stars thick as spilled flour. "I should tell you something," Maggie said. Caleb rocked slowly in his chair. "All right." "I got debts." Back in Kansas, my father, he left debts when he died. Gambling debts. I've been running from them for 2 years. Caleb stopped rocking. How much? More than I can pay. More than this ranch is probably worth. The silence stretched. Maggie gripped the armrest of her chair. This was the moment. This was where he'd tell her to pack her things. This was where the arrangement ended before it started. Anybody following you? Caleb asked. I don't know. Maybe. They got papers? Legal claim? I don't know that either. Caleb started rocking again. Slow, steady. Well, he said, if they come, they come. That's it? What do you want me to say? I want you to say what you're thinking. He looked at her. In the dark, his face was all shadow and jaw. I'm thinking you told me the truth when you didn't have to. I'm thinking you could have kept that to yourself for months, and I never would have known. And I'm thinking, a woman who tells a man about her debts on the first night ain't a woman who's trying to cheat him. Maggie's eyes stung. She blinked hard. You don't know me, she said. No, ma'am, I don't. But I know liars. I buried a business partner who was one. Lost 40 head of cattle to another. And I married a good woman who told me everything. Always. Even when it hurt. He paused. You remind me of her in that way. I ain't her, Caleb. I know that too. Silence again, but different now. The canyon was narrower. Not closed, maybe it never would be, but narrow enough to see the other side. We should sleep, Caleb said. Morning comes early. Caleb. Yeah? Thank you for not sending me back. He stood up. He looked down at her, and for just a moment, something crossed his face. Something that wasn't duty, wasn't arrangement, wasn't practicality. You walk through that church, Maggie. Ain't nobody sending you anywhere. He went inside. Maggie sat on the porch alone. She listened to the wind move across the land. She pressed her blistered hands together and closed her eyes. Somewhere out there, maybe Kansas, maybe closer, a man named Edgar Pike was looking through old ledgers, tracing debts, following trails. And he was getting closer. But tonight, Maggie didn't know that. Tonight, she just sat in the dark and breathed, and tried to remember the last time someone had said she was beautiful. It was today. A 7-year-old girl with a missing tooth and a blue ribbon. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Morning hit the Turner Ranch like a fist. Maggie woke to the sound of something crashing in the kitchen, followed by Lucy's voice, high, panicked, apologetic. I was trying to make eggs, Papa. Lucy, the stove is hot. I told you not to. But she's gotta eat. She's big. She needs more breakfast than us. Maggie sat up in the narrow bed of the sewing room. Her palms throbbed from yesterday's blisters. Her shoulders ached from the wood splitting. Her wedding dress hung on a nail by the door like a ghost she couldn't bury. She got up, put on the work dress, and walked into the kitchen. Caleb was on his knees, scraping burned egg off the floor. Lucy stood beside him, holding a cracked skillet, her face streaked with soot, her bottom lip trembling. I'm sorry, Lucy whispered when she saw Maggie. I wanted to make you breakfast, 'cause you're new, and Mama always said guests get breakfast first. Maggie took the skillet from her hands. I ain't a guest, Lucy. I live here now. So you'll make your own breakfast? I'll make all of ours. Caleb looked up from the floor. You said you burn things. I do, but I can boil water and slice bread without setting the house on fire. Probably. Lucy grinned. The missing tooth made her look like a jack-o'-lantern. Caleb stood, wiped his hands on his pants, and looked at Maggie for a long moment. She couldn't tell if he was grateful or skeptical or just tired. Coffee's in the tin by the window, he said, and walked outside.
Maggie made coffee. She burned the first pot. She made a second. It was weak but drinkable. Lucy sat at the table and watched her with the intense focus of a child who has decided something important. "Are you going to stay?" Lucy asked. "That's the plan." "My mama stayed, and then she didn't." Maggie stopped pouring. She set the pot down carefully and looked at the girl. "Your mama didn't choose to leave, Lucy." "I know. She got sick. But she still left." There was no argument for that. Maggie pulled out the chair across from Lucy and sat down. The chair creaked. Everything in this house creaked under her. "I can't promise I won't get sick," Maggie said. "But I can promise I won't leave because I want to." "You promise?" "I promise." Lucy held out her pinky finger. Maggie stared at it, then wrapped her own thick pinky around it. "That's a blood oath," Lucy said seriously. "If you break it, your finger falls off." "Who told you that?" "Tommy Beckman at school." "Tommy Beckman's daddy is the man who made fun of me in church yesterday." Lucy's eyes went hard, harder than any 7-year-old's eyes should go. "I know," she said. "Tommy's mean too. He told me my new mama was a cow." Maggie felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, crack, like ice before it gives. "What'd you say back?" "I pushed him in the creek." "Lucy, he deserved it." Maggie looked at this fierce, motherless, tooth-missing child and felt a rush of something she hadn't expected. Not love, not yet. Something before love. Something like recognition. "Don't push boys in creeks," Maggie said. "Even when they deserve it?" "Especially then. You push them in creeks, they just get wet. You prove them wrong, they stay burned." Lucy thought about this. Then she nodded. "I like you," she said. "You talk like a book, but a good book." Caleb came back in for coffee. He drank it without comment, which Maggie took as approval. He told her he'd be working the north fence line all day. Cattle had broken through. He'd be back by supper. "Lucy can show you the place," he said. "She knows it better than I do." "I know everything," Lucy confirmed. Caleb put his hat on, looked at Maggie one more time, and left. The door closed. The house was quiet, and Lucy Turner began her tour. She showed Maggie the chicken coop, the well, the garden that had gone to weeds. She showed her the barn where the horses lived, the tool shed with the broken lock, the creek where she'd pushed Tommy Beckman. She talked the entire time without pausing for breath. "This is where Mama planted roses, but they died. This is where Papa broke his arm last winter. This is where I found a snake, and Papa shot it, and I cried, 'cause I thought it was pretty." Maggie listened to all of it. She filed every detail away, the way she'd learned to file details. Carefully, completely, the way her mother had taught her before the debts took everything. Her mother had been a bookkeeper, the best in Hays City, Kansas. Numbers, ledgers, land records, cattle tallies. Margaret Hale Sr. could track a penny across 3 counties. Maggie had inherited that mind. The body came from her father's side. Big-boned, heavy, built for labor that never came, because the world didn't want women who looked like her doing anything but apologizing for existing. By mid-morning, Maggie had cataloged the ranch in her head. She knew the water situation was bad. The well was drawing low, and the creek ran thin for July. She knew the garden could be saved if someone weeded it properly. She knew the chicken coop had a gap in the wire that was letting something in at night, because there were feathers scattered in the dirt and not enough hens. She fixed the chicken wire with a rock and a strip of leather from the barn. Lucy watched her. "Papa tried to fix that 3 times, Lucy said. "Your papa's a cattleman, not a chicken man." "What are you?" Maggie tied off the leather strip and tested the wire. "I reckon I'm whatever this place needs me to be." By afternoon, Maggie had pulled weeds from half the garden, hauled 4 buckets of water from the creek, and cleaned the kitchen floor for the first time in what looked like months. Her body ached in places she didn't know had muscles. The heat was brutal. Her work dress was soaked through. She was sitting on the porch, drinking water and trying not to pass out, when Lucy climbed into her lap. Just like that. No asking, no hesitation. The child curled against Maggie's chest, pressed her face into the space between Maggie's arm and her body, and closed her eyes. "You're soft," Lucy mumbled. "Like a pillow." Maggie didn't move. She barely breathed. She looked down at this small person who had chosen her, physically, deliberately chosen her as a place to rest. Something shifted. Not in Maggie's head, in her body, in the deep, animal part of her that had spent 31 years being told her body was wrong. Too much, too big, too heavy. Take up less space, eat less, be less. And here was a child who wanted more of her, who found comfort in the very thing the world called a flaw. Maggie put her arm around Lucy and held her. They stayed like that until Caleb rode in at dusk. He came around the side of the barn and stopped when he saw them on the porch. Lucy was asleep again. Maggie was rocking the chair slowly, one hand on the child's back. Caleb tied his horse and walked over. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at them. "She asleep?" "Has been for an hour." "That's twice in 2 days." His voice was rough, uneven. "She didn't sleep through the night once in 8 months after Sarah died. Not once." "Maybe she was waiting for something." "For what?" "For someone who ain't going anywhere." Caleb took off his hat. He ran his hand through his hair. He put the hat back on. "I fixed the chicken wire," Maggie said, "and weeded half the garden. Your tomatoes are dead, but the beans might come back." "You didn't have to do all that." "I know." "I mean it. You ain't here to work yourself into the ground." "Then what am I here for, Caleb?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at his sleeping daughter, and Maggie saw something move across his face. Grief, maybe, or gratitude, or the complicated place where those two things live together. "You're here because Lucy needs you," he said. "Just Lucy?" The question hung between them. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'll start supper," he said, and went inside. Maggie sat in the dark with the sleeping child and thought, that's the second time he's walked away from that question. The first week passed in a rhythm. Caleb worked the cattle, Maggie worked the house and garden. Lucy followed Maggie everywhere like a shadow with opinions. By the third day, Maggie had mapped the entire property in her head. Water sources, grazing patterns, fence lines, the low spot by the south ridge where the cattle liked to bunch during heat. She'd noticed the grass thinning in the east pasture and told Caleb at supper. "You're overgrazing that section," she said. "If you rotate them to the west side for 2 weeks, the grass will recover before fall." Caleb stared at her. "How'd you know that?" "My mother managed a cattleman's books in Kansas. I grew up reading land reports." "You can read land reports?" "I can read most anything, Caleb. I'm fat, not stupid." The words came out harder than she meant. She saw him flinch. "I didn't say." "I know you didn't. I'm sorry. I'm used to people thinking it." Caleb put down his fork. "I ain't people, Maggie." "No, you ain't." The silence after that was different from the others, warmer. The canyon between them had narrowed to something a person could almost step across. Lucy, who had been eating cornbread with the focus of a surgeon, looked up and said, "Are y'all gonna kiss now?" "No," they both said at the same time. "You said it at the same time. That means you're in love. Tommy Beckman said so." "Tommy Beckman needs to stop talking," Caleb muttered. "I already pushed him in the creek for you, Maggie. I'll do it again." "Nobody's pushing nobody in no creek," Caleb said. "Double negative, Papa. That means somebody is pushing somebody." Caleb looked at Maggie. She's been like this since she could talk. I like her like this, Maggie said. Lucy beamed. Caleb shook his head, but the corner of his mouth moved, just barely. That was the closest thing to a smile Maggie had seen from him. On Saturday, Caleb drove into town for supplies. He asked Maggie if she wanted to come. No. You sure? I'm sure. He didn't push it. He left Lucy with Maggie and drove the wagon to Red Creek alone. He came back 3 hours later with supplies and a face like stone. Maggie was hanging laundry when he pulled up. She could see it in his shoulders. Tight, rigid. The way a man holds himself when he's swallowing something ugly. What happened? She asked. Nothing. Caleb. He climbed down from the wagon and started unloading flour and sugar without looking at her. They're talking, he said finally. In town. About you. They've been talking since I got here. This is different. Roy Beckman's telling people I married you for money. Says you must have some inheritance or land, 'cause no man in his right mind would... He stopped. His hands gripped a sack of flour so hard his knuckles whitened. Would what? Maggie asked quietly. I ain't gonna repeat it. I can guess. Then don't make me say it. Maggie took the flour from his hands. She carried it inside. He followed with the sugar. They put the supplies away in silence. When everything was stored, Caleb stood by the stove and said, Helen Pratt told me to my face that I'd lost my senses. Said I should have married her sister. Pretty girl, 18, from Denver. Said I was settling for charity. Charity, Maggie repeated. The word tasted like ash. I told her my marriage was none of her concern. And she said the whole town was concerned. Said a man like me with a little girl shouldn't be bringing someone like you into a decent home. Maggie gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles were white now, too. Someone like me, she said. Her words, not mine, not ever mine. I know that, Caleb. Do you? She looked at him. His gray eyes were fierce, almost angry, but not at her. At something bigger than both of them. At the town. At the world that decided a woman's worth by the number on a scale. I'm going to tell you something, Caleb said, and I want you to hear it. I don't care what they say. Not Helen Pratt, not Roy Beckman, not a single soul in Red Creek. You walked into my house, and in 1 week, you fixed my chicken coop, saved my garden, figured out my grazing patterns, and made my daughter sleep through the night. That's more than any pretty girl from Denver would have done. Maggie's throat closed. She turned away from him so he wouldn't see her face. Don't turn away, Caleb said. I'm talking to you. I can't look at you right now. Why not? Because if you keep saying things like that, I'm going to cry, and I don't cry in front of people. I ain't people. She almost laughed. You just used my own words on me. They were good words. She turned back. Her eyes were wet. She didn't wipe them. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me for telling the truth. That ain't a favor. That's just decency. Lucy appeared in the doorway, blue ribbon in her hair. Why's Maggie crying? Who do I need to push in the creek? Nobody, Caleb said. It's happy crying, Maggie said, wiping her face. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. That's confusing. Yes, it is. Are you happy? Maggie looked at this child, this fierce little girl who'd chosen her in front of a whole town. Getting there, she said. 2 more weeks passed. The rhythm deepened. Maggie found her place in the machinery of the ranch the way a gear finds its slot. Not gracefully, not easily, but eventually, click by click, until the whole thing ran smoother than before. She couldn't ride well, that was true. Caleb put her on the gentlest mare they had, a sway-backed creature named Biscuit,
who moved like she was walking through mud. Maggie's weight made Biscuit groan, and twice she slid sideways out of the saddle and landed hard in the dirt. Lucy laughed the first time. Caleb didn't. "Get back on," he said. "Not mean, not impatient. The way you talk to someone you believe can do a thing, even when they can't yet." Maggie got back on, and fell off again, and got back on. By the end of the second week, she could ride Biscuit at a walk without falling. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't graceful, but it was done. The day everything changed started like any other. Caleb was mending the south fence. Lucy was with Maggie at the creek, filling water buckets. The sun was high and mean, the way Colorado sun gets in late July, when the sky forgets how to make clouds. Lucy was wading in the shallow part, catching crawdads, when her foot slipped on a wet rock. The child went down hard. Her head hit the edge of a flat stone, and for one terrible second, she was underwater and not moving. Maggie didn't think. She dropped the bucket. She ran. 240 pounds of her crashed into that creek like a rock slide. Water exploded around her. She grabbed Lucy with both hands, lifted her straight up out of the water, and held her against her chest. Lucy coughed, sputtered, screamed. Blood ran from a cut above her ear, mixing with creek water and streaming down Maggie's arms. "I got you," Maggie said. "I got you, baby, I got you." "My head hurts." I know it does. Hold on to me." Lucy locked her arms around Maggie's neck. Maggie waded out of the creek, water dragging at her skirt, her boots sinking in the mud. She carried the child up the bank like she weighed nothing. She ran. Maggie Hale ran across that open ground with a bleeding child in her arms, her heavy body pounding the earth, her breath tearing in and out of her lungs like a saw through wood. She ran past the garden, past the chicken coop, past the barn, all the way to the house. She kicked the door open. She put Lucy on the table. She grabbed a clean cloth and pressed it to the cut. "Look at me," Maggie said. "Lucy, look at my eyes." Lucy looked. Her pupils were the same size. She was crying, but alert. "How many fingers?" Maggie held up 3. "3. It hurts, Maggie." "I know. The bleeding's gonna stop. Head cuts bleed a lot, but they ain't always bad. Your mama ever tell you that?" "No." "Well, I'm telling you now. Hold this cloth and press hard. Can you do that?" Lucy pressed the cloth to her own head. Her hands were shaking. Maggie ran back outside and rang the iron triangle by the barn. 3 sharp clangs, the emergency signal. Then she ran back to Lucy. By the time Caleb came riding in at full gallop, Maggie had cleaned the cut, stopped the bleeding, and was holding Lucy in her lap at the kitchen table, singing something tuneless and low while the child gripped her dress with both fists. Caleb burst through the door. His face was white. "What happened?" She slipped in the creek, hit her head on a rock. Cut's not deep, but she swallowed some water. "Lucy." "I'm okay, Papa." Lucy's voice was small and stuffy from crying. "Maggie saved me. She ran real fast. I didn't know big people could run that fast." Caleb dropped to his knees beside them. He put his hand on Lucy's head, checking the wound. His fingers were shaking. "It's clean," Maggie said. "I used the whiskey from the shelf." She screamed, but it's clean. Caleb looked at Maggie. His eyes were wet. She'd never seen that before. Hadn't thought she would. "Thank you," he said, and his voice broke on the second word. "Don't you dare thank me for that. She's my—" Maggie stopped. "She's your what?" Maggie swallowed. "She's mine. That's what she is. That's what she's been since she grabbed my hand in that church." Caleb didn't say anything. He put his forehead against Maggie's knee, the knee of the large, sweating, creek-soaked woman holding his daughter, and he stayed there for a long time. Lucy fell asleep in Maggie's arms. Again. Caleb didn't move away. 3 days later, a man rode into Red Creek on a black horse with a leather satchel strapped to his saddle. He tied up outside the saloon, ordered a whiskey, and asked the bartender a question that would set fire to everything Maggie had built. "I'm looking for a woman," the man said. "Large woman. Came west from Kansas. Goes by the name Hale." The bartender poured the whiskey. "What's your business with her?" The man smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who collected things. Debts, secrets, leverage, the way other men collected horses. "My name is Edgar Pike," he said, "and Miss Hale owes me a great deal of money." Roy Beckman was 3 stools down. He'd heard every word. He set his whiskey down and turned toward Edgar Pike with the look of a man who'd just been handed a loaded gun. "Mister," Roy said, "let me buy you another drink, 'cause I got a story about that woman that's gonna make your day." Edgar Pike sat down, and Red Creek's long summer got a whole lot hotter. Edgar Pike spent 3 days in Red Creek before Maggie even knew he existed. 3 days of buying drinks at the saloon. 3 days of asking questions with that thin smile, collecting names and grudges the way a man pans for gold. Patient, methodical, knowing the river always gives up its secrets if you wait long enough. Roy Beckman gave him everything. The wedding, the laughter, the fat bride in the straining dress, Caleb Turner's stubbornness, the little girl who'd called her mama. Every detail, served up with whiskey and spite, because Roy Beckman had been nursing a grudge against Caleb Turner for 2 years over a land dispute, and now God had handed him a weapon. Edgar listened. Edgar smiled. Edgar bought another round. On the 4th day, he rode out to the Turner ranch. Maggie was in the garden when she heard the horse. She stood up from the bean rows, dirt on her knees, sweat running down her back, and shielded her eyes against the late July sun. A man she'd never seen sat on a black horse at the edge of the property. He wore a dark coat despite the heat, and a leather satchel hung from his saddle like a tumor. He didn't dismount. "Margaret Hale," he said. Not a question. Maggie's blood went cold. The way blood goes cold when you hear a sound from a nightmare you thought you'd stopped having. "My name is Turner," she said. "No, ma'am. Your name is Hale. It's been Hale for 31 years, and a piece of paper from a frontier church don't change what's owed under that name." Maggie's hands were shaking. She pressed them into her apron. "Who are you?" "Edgar Pike. I represent the Garrett Lending Company out of Dodge City. Your father, Samuel Hale, borrowed $412 in the spring of 1885. He died without paying it. The debt transferred to his surviving heir." He paused. "That's you, Miss Hale." "I told you, it's Turner." "And I told you, a name don't erase a number." Lucy came around the corner of the house, holding a chicken she'd been chasing. She stopped when she saw the stranger. "Who's that?" Lucy asked. "Go inside, Lucy." "But now." Lucy looked at Maggie's face and went inside without another word. The chicken squawked and ran. Edgar watched the child disappear, then turned back to Maggie. "Pretty little girl," he said. "This is a nice spread. Good land, good water. Shame if a debt collector had to put a lien on it." "This ranch ain't mine. It's my husband's." In the state of Colorado, a husband's property can be seized to satisfy a wife's debts if the wife entered the marriage without disclosure. "Did you tell Mr. Turner about the $412 before the wedding?" Maggie didn't answer. Edgar smiled. "That's what I thought. I told him after. After don't count in court, ma'am." Maggie stepped forward. 1 step. Edgar's horse shifted. "What do you want?" $412, plus 3 years of interest at 12%. That brings the total to
$561.28, Maggie said. Edgar's smile flickered, just for a second, like a candle in a draft. You did the math, he said. I've been doing the math since the day my father died, Mr. Pike. I know exactly what's owed. I also know that the legal interest rate in Kansas is 10%, not 12%. And I know that the Garrett Lending Company was cited by the Dodge City Municipal Court in 1886 for predatory lending practices. Silence. Edgar's smile came back, but thinner, tighter. You've done your research. My mother was a bookkeeper. I can read a ledger better than most men can read a Bible. That's impressive, ma'am. But reading a ledger and paying a debt are two different things. You got $561? No. Then we got a problem. We got a lot of problems, Mr. Pike, but that one's at the bottom of the list. Edgar stared at her. Then he tipped his hat with a slow, deliberate motion that wasn't courtesy. It was warning. I'll be in Red Creek for a while, he said. I'm a patient man, but patience has a limit, and when mine runs out, I go to the county judge. And once I go to the judge, this ranch, these cattle, that little girl's home, all of it goes on the auction block. He turned the horse. You think about that, Miss Hale. It's Turner. He rode away without looking back. Maggie stood in the garden. Her legs were shaking. The sun beat down on her head, and her hands gripped her apron so tight, the fabric tore at the seam. Lucy's face appeared in the kitchen window. Maggie, who was that man? Nobody, sweetheart. He didn't look like nobody. He looked like a bad man in a story. Maggie walked inside, sat down at the table, and put her head in her hands. She had to tell Caleb. She had to tell him everything. Not just the debt, which she'd already confessed, but the amount, the interest, the legal threat, the fact that Edgar Pike could take this ranch out from under them with a signature from a county judge. She had to tell him that marrying her might cost him everything. Caleb came home at dusk. He knew something was wrong the moment he walked in. The house was quiet. Lucy was in bed early, and Maggie was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee she hadn't touched. What happened? He asked. Sit down, Caleb. He didn't. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands. A man came here today. Name's Edgar Pike. He's a debt collector from Dodge City. Caleb's face didn't change. The debt you told me about. Yes, but I didn't tell you all of it. Tell me now. It's $561, plus interest. He says he can put a lien on this ranch if I don't pay. He says because I didn't tell you before the wedding, your property is liable. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Maggie waited. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Is that true? He asked. The legal part. I don't know. Maybe. I ain't a lawyer. Is the debt real? The debt is real. My father owed it. He died owing it. I've been running from it for 3 years. And this Pike, he's legitimate? The company he works for has been in trouble before, cited for overcharging. But cited ain't shut down. He's still operating, and he's got papers. Caleb put his hat on the hook by the door. He walked to the stove, poured coffee, drank it cold. Then he set the cup down and looked at Maggie. $561. Yes. I don't have that. I got maybe 80 in the bank and 200 head of cattle worth maybe $3 a head at market. That's 600. But if I sell the herd, I got no ranch. I know. So we can't pay. No. Then we fight it. Maggie looked up. How? You said his interest rate was wrong. You said the company's been cited. That's something. It's something in a courtroom with a lawyer. We ain't got a lawyer, Caleb. We got you. I ain't a lawyer either. No, but you did the math in your head before he finished his sentence. You knew the legal interest rate. You knew the court citation. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Maggie, I married a woman who read more than she talked and counted everything she saw. I didn't know what to do with that. Now I do. You want me to fight a debt collector. I want you to beat him. And if I can't, then we lose the ranch together. That ain't worse than losing it alone. Maggie stared at him. This quiet, stubborn, unreadable man who'd extended his hand at an altar while a town laughed, who'd kissed her forehead instead of her mouth, who'd slept in a separate room every night without complaint, who'd never once, not once, made her feel like a burden. All right, she said. All right? I'll need every piece of paper you got, every deed, every record, every bill of sale for the last 5 years. And I'll need to go to town. You hate town. I do, but the county clerk's office has records, and I need to see if Pike's filing is legal before he gets to a judge. When? Tomorrow? Caleb nodded. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I'll drive you. That was the end of the conversation. When Caleb Turner decided something, it stayed decided. They rode into Red Creek the next morning. Lucy sat between them on the wagon bench, kicking her feet and humming. She didn't know why they were going to town, and Maggie intended to keep it that way. The first person they saw was Helen Pratt, sweeping the boardwalk in front of the feed store. Helen stopped sweeping and stared. Well, Helen said, the Turners, all 3 of you. Morning, Helen, Caleb said without slowing. I heard you had a visitor yesterday, Mrs. Turner. Man from Kansas? Maggie didn't look at her. News travels fast. It does when it's interesting. Helen leaned on her broom. Roy says the man's a debt collector. Says you're in trouble. Roy says a lot of things, most of them wrong. Is this one wrong? Maggie turned and looked at Helen Pratt. Looked at her straight on, without flinching, without shrinking, without any of the smallness people expected from her. Mrs. Pratt, the day I need your concern, I'll ask for it. Until then, mind your broom. Helen's mouth opened and closed. Caleb kept driving. Lucy waved at Helen cheerfully as they passed. Bye, Mrs. Pratt. Your hair looks funny today. Lucy, Caleb said. It does, though. The county clerk's office was a single room in the back of the post office. A thin man named Gerald Fisk sat behind a desk covered in papers, eating a sandwich. Help ya? He said without looking up. I need to see any filings made in the last week under the name Hale or Turner, Maggie said. Fisk looked up. He looked at Maggie, then at Caleb, then back at Maggie. You the Turner bride? I'm Maggie Turner. I need those records, Mr. Fisk. Ma'am, I can't just... Section 14 of the Colorado Territorial Property Code says any citizen has the right to inspect public filings related to their own name or property. I'm a citizen. My name's on those filings. Show me the records. Fisk stared at her. Caleb leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed and said nothing. I didn't know you was a lawyer, Fisk said. I ain't. I'm a bookkeeper's daughter. The records, Mr. Fisk. He got up, grumbling, and pulled a filing drawer. He set a folder on the desk. Maggie opened it. Inside was a single document, a preliminary lien notice filed by Edgar Pike on behalf of the Garrett Lending Company against the property of Caleb and Margaret Turner for the sum of $561.28. Maggie read every word. Twice. Her eyes moved down the page with the focused intensity of a woman who'd grown up watching her mother do this exact thing. Then she found it. She found the crack. Mr. Fisk, does this filing include a notarized copy of the original loan agreement? Fisk looked over her shoulder. Don't look like it. Colorado territorial law requires the original loan agreement to be attached to any lien filing. Without it, the filing is incomplete and can be challenged. I wouldn't know about that, ma'am. I would, Maggie closed the folder. This filing is invalid. He's bluffing. Caleb pushed off the doorframe. You sure? He filed without the original paperwork. Either he ain't got it, or he didn't think I'd check. Either way, this paper, she held up the filing, ain't worth the ink on it. So we're safe? For now. He can refile with the right documents if he has them, but this buys us time. They walked out of the clerk's office. Maggie was holding the folder, and for the first time since Edgar Pike had ridden onto their property, she could breathe. That breathing lasted exactly 40 seconds, because Edgar Pike was standing across the street, leaning against the saloon post, watching them. Roy Beckman stood beside him, and next to Roy was a man Maggie didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. Mrs. Turner, Edgar called across the street. I see you've been to the clerk's office. Smart woman. I admire that. Maggie stopped walking. Caleb stepped in front of her. Get off the street, Pike, Caleb said. It's a public street, Mr. Turner. I got every right to stand on it. And I got every right to remove you from it. Careful now. Edgar nodded toward the well-dressed man. This is Mr. Howard Langley, attorney from Denver. He's agreed to represent my interests in this matter. A lawyer. Pike had brought a lawyer. Maggie felt her stomach drop. Mr. Langley here tells me my filing was missing some paperwork, Edgar continued. I appreciate you pointing that out, Mrs. Turner. We'll have the corrected documents filed by end of week. Then you admit the current filing is invalid, Maggie said. I admit it was an oversight. Won't happen twice. A lot of things won't happen twice, Mr. Pike. Edgar tilted his head. Meanin'? Meanin', you filed a lien using a 12% interest rate in a state that caps at 10. That's fraud. And your corrected documents better reflect the legal rate, or I'll challenge every filing you make in this territory from now until they bury you. Langley, the lawyer, shifted uncomfortably. He leaned toward Edgar and whispered something. Edgar's smile tightened. The rate will be corrected, Langley said smoothly. But the debt stands, ma'am. Your father borrowed money and didn't repay it. The law is clear on inherited debts in Colorado territory. The law is clear when the lending company is legitimate, Maggie said. The Garrett Lending Company was cited by Dodge City Municipal Court in 1886. I want to see your license to operate in Colorado. Silence. Langley's face didn't change, but his eyes did. Just a flicker. Just enough. We'll provide all necessary documentation, he said. You'll provide it before you refile, or I'll petition the court to suspend your operations pending review. Roy Beckman, who'd been watching this exchange with increasing confusion, finally spoke up. Now hold on. You can't just... She's a woman. She can't file petitions and... Any citizen can file a petition, Mr. Beckman, including women. Including fat women who read more than you do. Roy turned red. Edgar's smile disappeared entirely for the first time. Caleb stood beside Maggie. He hadn't said a word during the legal exchange. He hadn't needed to. He was watching his wife dismantle a debt collector on a public street with nothing but a dead mother's education and the kind of anger that comes from 31 years of being underestimated. We're done here, Maggie said. She turned and walked toward the wagon. Caleb followed. Lucy, who'd been sitting on the wagon bench the whole time, kicked her feet and asked, Did you win? Not yet, Maggie said. But I ain't lost. Edgar Pike watched them go. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. He turned to Langley. Can she do what she said, the petition? Langley nodded slowly. She can. And if the licensing question is valid, we've got a problem. I don't have problems, Edgar said. I solve them. This one's got teeth, Mr. Pike. Then I'll pull 'em.
He walked back into the saloon. Roy Beckman followed. "I know how to get to her," Roy said. "I know exactly how to break that woman." Edgar stopped. "I'm listening." "The girl, the Turner girl. She's attached to the fat woman like a tick on a dog. Anything happens to that girl, Maggie Turner falls apart." Edgar looked at Roy for a long moment. "You're a cruel man, Beckman. I'm a practical man. What's the difference?" Roy grinned. Edgar didn't, but he didn't walk away either. 2 nights later, Maggie woke to the sound of horses. Not Caleb's horse, multiple horses, moving fast along the fence line. She got up. She went to the window. 3 riders, no lanterns, moving through the cattle in the east pasture. Rustlers. Maggie pulled on her boots and grabbed the shotgun from above the door. The one Caleb had shown her the second day. The one he'd said was loaded and ready, and she should never touch unless she had to. She touched it. She opened the back door and stepped into the night. "Hey!" she shouted into the dark. "Get off this land!" A gunshot cracked. Not at her, into the air. A warning. The cattle spooked. She heard them running, hooves thundering in the dark. Caleb's bedroom door slammed open. He came out barefoot, rifle in hand. "What's happening?" "3 riders, east pasture. They're scattering the herd." Caleb ran for the barn. Maggie followed. "Stay with Lucy," he said. "Lucy's asleep." "Then stay in the house." "Caleb Turner, if you think I'm standing in that kitchen while somebody steals your cattle—" "Our cattle," he said. "And I think you're going to do what I ask. Because one of us needs to be alive to raise that girl if this goes wrong." That stopped her. She stood in the barn doorway while Caleb saddled his horse in the dark. "Be careful," she said. "I'm always careful." "No, you ain't. You married a stranger from Kansas with gambling debts. That ain't careful." He almost smiled. Even now, even in the dark with gunshots echoing off the ridge, he almost smiled. "Best decision I ever made," he said, and rode out. Maggie went back inside. She locked the doors. She sat in the dark kitchen with the shotgun across her lap and listened. More shots. Distant now. Moving east. Lucy appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Maggie? I heard noises." "Come here, baby." Lucy climbed into her lap. Maggie held the shotgun in one hand and the child in the other. She rocked slowly in the kitchen chair, back and forth, listening to the night. An hour passed. 2. Caleb came back at dawn. His shirt was torn. His knuckles were bloody. He walked in, saw Maggie with the shotgun and Lucy asleep in her lap, and sank into the chair across from her. "They got 40 head," he said. "Drove 'em through the east fence and into the hills." "Who?" "Couldn't see faces, but one of 'em was riding a horse I've seen tied up outside the saloon. Brown mare, white blaze, Roy Beckman's horse." Caleb nodded. "This ain't about cattle," Maggie said. "No, it ain't. It's about me. It's about the debt. Pike's pushing us." "I know." "Caleb, maybe I should—" "Don't." His voice was sharp. Sharper than she'd ever heard it. "Don't say what you're about to say." "You don't know what I was going to say." "You were going to say you should leave. That if you go, Pike follows you and leaves the ranch alone. That I'd be better off without you." Maggie's eyes burned. "Wouldn't you?" "I had a life before you, Maggie. I had a ranch, a daughter, a dead wife, and a town that pitied me. I was dying slow and I didn't even know it. Then you walked down that aisle and my daughter started sleeping through the night and my garden came back to life. And somebody finally told Helen Pratt to mind her own business." He leaned forward. "You ain't the problem. You never were." "Then what do we do?" "We do what you've been doing. We fight smart. We find proof that Pike's operating illegal. We prove Beckman rustled our cattle. And we do it before Pike's lawyer refiled those papers." "That's a lot of fighting." "I know. For a woman you've known 6 weeks."
I know that, too. Lucy stirred in Maggie's lap. She opened one eye, saw her father's bloody knuckles, and said, "Did you punch somebody?" "No." "You should have. Maggie, tell him he should have punched somebody." "Go back to sleep, Lucy." "I can't. There's too much drama in this family." Despite everything, the lost cattle, the torn shirt, the blood, the fear, Maggie laughed. It came out of her like something that had been locked away and broke free, loud and sudden and real. Caleb looked at her, and this time he didn't almost smile. He smiled. Full. Complete. The kind of smile that changes a face entirely, that takes a hard man and shows you the boy he used to be. "There it is," he said quietly. "There's what?" "That laugh. That's why I married you." Maggie stopped laughing. She looked at him with wet eyes and an aching chest and a sleeping child in her lap. "I thought you married me because I was honest." "I married you because you were honest. I kept you because of that laugh." The sun came up. It came through the kitchen window and lit them both, the battered rancher and the fat woman with the shotgun and the sleeping girl between them. Maggie set the shotgun against the wall. She shifted Lucy to one arm and extended her other hand to Caleb. He took it. His grip was rough, calloused, steady. The same grip he'd offered at the altar. But different now, because this time he wasn't just making a decision. He was holding on. "We fight," Maggie said. "We fight," Caleb said. They held each other's hands across the kitchen table while their daughter slept and 40 head of stolen cattle disappeared into the Colorado hills. And in town, Edgar Pike was already drafting his corrected filing with a legal interest rate and a Denver attorney's signature, and a plan that didn't involve cattle or courtrooms at all. It involved something much simpler. It involved a 7-year-old girl, a schoolyard, and a lie that would make Maggie Turner do the one thing she swore she'd never do: surrender. The lie came wrapped in a child's tears. Lucy came home from school on a Tuesday with her dress torn and dirt on her face and her blue ribbon missing. She walked through the kitchen door, looked at Maggie, and burst into sobs so violent her whole body shook. Maggie dropped the pot she was washing. She was on her knees in front of Lucy in 2 seconds. "What happened? Lucy, look at me. What happened?" "Tommy Beckman said. He said—" Lucy couldn't get the words out. She was choking on them. "Breathe, baby. Breathe first, then tell me." Lucy sucked in air. Her hands were fists at her sides. Her chin was trembling. "Tommy said a man in town told his daddy that you stole money, that you're a thief, and that the sheriff's going to come and take you to jail, and I'll never see you again." Maggie's hands went cold. She gripped Lucy's arms gently. "That ain't true, Lucy." "He said it in front of everybody. He said my mama's a fat thief, and she's going to prison, and I'm going to be alone again." "You listen to me. That is a lie. I did not steal anything." "Then why did he say it? Why would he say it if it wasn't true?" "Because sometimes people say cruel things to hurt other people. And sometimes they use children to do it, because they're too cowardly to say it to a grown person's face." Lucy looked at her. Her eyes were swollen. Her lip was split. Not from crying, from something else. "Lucy, your lip. Did Tommy hit you?" Lucy didn't answer. "Lucy Turner." "I hit him first," Lucy whispered. "He said you were a thief, and I hit him, and then he hit me back, and then Mrs. Cooper pulled us apart, and she said I was a violent child, and she was going to talk to Papa about whether I should stay in school." Maggie sat back on her heels. Her chest was so tight she thought her ribs might crack. A 7-year-old girl, fighting in a schoolyard, defending a woman's honor with her fists because the adults in this town couldn't leave a child out of their ugliness. This was Edgar Pike's work. Not the fists, the lie, the rumor, planted in Roy Beckman's ear, passed to Roy's son Tommy, weaponized in a schoolyard where Maggie couldn't fight back. He'd found her weakness. Not the debt, not the ranch, not even the town's contempt. Lucy. Maggie pulled the child into her arms and held her. Lucy sobbed against Maggie's chest, gripping her dress with both hands the way she'd gripped it the night of the rustlers. "Am I a bad person?" Lucy asked into the fabric. "Mrs. Cooper said good girls don't hit." "You ain't a bad person, Lucy. You're the best person I know. Then why does everything keep going wrong?" Maggie didn't have an answer. She held the child and rocked her and stared at the wall and thought about Edgar Pike and his thin smile and the way he'd said, "Pretty little girl," while looking at Lucy like she was leverage. When Caleb came home, Maggie told him everything. She told him, with Lucy asleep in the bedroom, the door closed, her voice low and controlled, because if she let the anger out, she wasn't sure she could put it back. Caleb listened. His face went from confusion to understanding, to a cold, quiet fury that Maggie hadn't seen before. "He used a child," Caleb said. "He used our child. I'll kill him." "No, you won't. Maggie, you'll go to prison and Lucy will have nobody. That ain't a plan. That's a reaction." "Then what's the plan?" Maggie put her hands flat on the table. "I've been thinking about this since she came home. Pike's moving faster than I expected. He's got a lawyer. He's got Beckman. He's got the town turned against us. And now he's going after Lucy. So what do we do?" "I go to him." "No. I go to him, Caleb, not to surrender, to end this." "How?" "The way my mother would have. With numbers." Maggie had been working at night. After Caleb went to bed, after Lucy was asleep, she'd been sitting at the kitchen table with every document she could find. Caleb's ranch records, her own memory of her father's dealings, the filing from the county clerk's office, the interest calculations, the Garrett Lending Company's history. And she'd found something. Not just the interest rate violation, not just the missing license. Something bigger. "The original loan," Maggie said. "My father's loan. $412. "What about it?" "My father couldn't sign his name, Caleb. He was illiterate. He made his mark, an X, on every document he ever touched. My mother signed everything else for him." So the loan agreement Pike is using has my father's signature. A full written signature. Samuel Hale, in cursive. Caleb stared at her. "My father couldn't write his own name. That signature is forged. The loan was never legal." The silence in the kitchen was complete. Not empty. Full. Full of the weight of what she'd just said. "You're sure?" Caleb said. "I'm sure. I watched my father make his mark 100 times. He was ashamed of it. He hid it from everyone he could. But it was an X, Caleb. Always an X. And that document has a signature that somebody else wrote. Pike. Maybe Pike. Maybe someone at the lending company. But it don't matter who. What matters is it's forged, and a forged loan agreement means the entire debt is fraudulent." Caleb leaned back in his chair. He ran his hand over his face. "You're telling me we've been running from a debt that never existed. I'm telling you I've been running from a lie for 3 years, across 2 states, into a marriage with a stranger. Because a man with a leather satchel told me I owed money on a piece of paper my father never signed." Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from weakness, from rage. 3 years of running. 3 years of shame. 3 years of believing she was her father's burden, his legacy of failure, his debt made flesh. And it was a lie. "I need proof," Maggie said. "The original loan agreement. Pike's got it in that satchel, or it's in the county filing."
I need to get my hands on it and show a judge that the signature don't match my father's mark." "How do you prove what your father's mark looked like?" "My mother kept copies. She kept copies of everything. They were in a trunk in Kansas City, at a boarding house where I lived before I came here." "Kansas City's 1,000 miles from here." "I don't need the trunk. I need one document with my father's mark on it. And I know where one is." "Where?" "The marriage license. My parents' marriage license, filed in Hays City, Kansas, in 1854. My father marked it with an X. The county keeps a copy." "That's still Kansas. But I can write to the clerk. I can request a copy by post. It'll take 2 weeks, maybe 3. "We don't have 3 weeks. Pike's refiling this week." "Then I need to stall him." "How?" Maggie looked at Caleb. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were dry and hard. "I go to town tomorrow. I walk into that saloon, and I tell Edgar Pike to his face that I know the loan is forged." "He'll deny it." "Of course he'll deny it, but he'll also panic. Because if I'm right, and I am right, then he's not just a debt collector. He's a criminal. Forging loan documents is a felony, Caleb. He goes to prison." "And if he doesn't panic? If he calls your bluff?" "Then I file a petition with the county court to delay his lien pending verification of the original loan documents. That buys us the 3 weeks." "You figured all this out at the kitchen table." "My mother figured it out. She taught me. She said numbers don't lie, and papers tell the truth even when people won't." Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just held it, the way he'd held it that morning after the rustlers, the way he'd held it at the altar. "You're the smartest person I've ever met," he said. "I ain't smart. I'm angry. There's a difference. In my experience, the best things get done by angry people who know how to count." Morning came hard and bright. Maggie put on her work dress, the cleanest one, the one that didn't have garden dirt on the hem. She braided her hair tight. She looked at herself in the small mirror in the sewing room. Large, heavy, sweating already in the July heat. A body the world had mocked and dismissed for 31 years. But behind that body was a mind that could read a ledger faster than a Denver attorney and calculate compound interest in her head. She walked out. Caleb was waiting with the wagon. Lucy was beside him. "She ain't coming," Maggie said. "I want to come," Lucy said. "Absolutely not." "But, Lucy, I need you here. I need you to watch the house and count the chickens and make sure Biscuit don't eat the garden fence again. Can you do that?" "That's not real jobs. That's you making me stay." "Both things can be true." Lucy crossed her arms. "Fine, but if you're not back by supper, I'm walking to town and nobody's stopping me." "Deal." Caleb drove the wagon into Red Creek. He stopped at the edge of the main street. "You want me to come in?" he asked. "No, this is between me and Pike." "Maggie, you being in there makes it about you protecting me. I don't need protection. I need to be the one who walks in alone." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll be at the feed store. You need me, you holler. If I need you, you'll hear it. Won't need to holler." She climbed down from the wagon. It rocked under her weight. She landed heavy, dusted off her dress, and walked toward the saloon. The doors were open. Midday heat poured through them. She could hear voices inside, the clink of glasses, the scrape of chairs. She walked in. Every head turned. The same silence that had hit the church 6 weeks ago hit the saloon now. But this time, Maggie didn't stop. She didn't hesitate. She didn't grip her apron or press her hands flat to keep them from shaking. She walked to the back table where Edgar Pike sat with Howard Langley, a stack of papers between them, whiskey glasses half empty. She pulled out the empty chair across from them and sat down. "Mr. Pike," she said. Edgar leaned back.
His smile was already in place, thin and practiced. "Mrs. Turner, this is a surprise." "No, it ain't. You've been waiting for me to come. You sent a lie through a schoolyard to a 7-year-old girl and waited to see what I'd do. Well, here I am." Langley shifted in his seat. Edgar didn't move.
"I don't know what you're referring to," Edgar said. "Tommy Beckman told my daughter I was a thief going to prison. Tommy Beckman's daddy drinks with you every night at this table. You put that lie in a child's mouth to break me. It didn't work. Ma'am, I have no control over what children say in schoolyards." "No, but you have control over what you say to their fathers. And I have control over what I say to a judge." Maggie put both hands on the table, flat, steady. "The loan agreement your company is using to file a lien against my husband's ranch bears the signature of Samuel Hale, a full cursive signature." "That's correct. My father was illiterate, Mr. Pike. He couldn't write his own name. He signed every document with an X, every single one, including his marriage license, which is filed with the county clerk in Hays City, Kansas, and which I have requested a copy of by post." Edgar's smile didn't disappear, but it froze. Like a painting of a smile, rather than the real thing. "When that copy arrives," Maggie continued, "it will show my father's mark, an X, next to my mother's signature. And when I present that to a judge alongside your loan agreement with its forged signature, you won't be filing liens, Mr. Pike. You'll be answering charges." "That's a very creative theory, Mrs. Turner." "It ain't a theory, it's arithmetic. My mother was a bookkeeper. She kept records. She kept copies. She taught me that every lie leaves a number that don't add up. And yours don't add up, and I can prove it." Langley put his hand on Edgar's arm. "Mr. Pike, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "We'll discuss it here," Maggie said, "in front of every man in this saloon. Because every man in this saloon has heard what you've been saying about me for weeks. They've heard I'm a thief, a debtor, a fat woman who trapped a widower. They've heard your lies, Mr. Pike. Now they're going to hear the truth." She raised her voice, not shouting, controlled, the way her mother used to read figures in a courtroom. Clear, precise, unanswerable. "The Garrett Lending Company was cited for predatory practices in 1886. You filed a lien in this county using an illegal interest rate. You filed without attaching the original loan documents. And the loan itself was forged, signed with a name my father couldn't write." The saloon was silent. Men held their drinks and stared. "You didn't come to Red Creek to collect a debt," Maggie said. "You came to steal a ranch. Because that's what you do, Mr. Pike. You find vulnerable people and you take what's theirs. You did it in Kansas. You're doing it here. And I am done running from you." Edgar Pike looked at her. The smile was gone now, completely. Underneath it was something cold, something calculating, something that had been doing this for a long time and didn't like being caught. "You've got no proof," he said quietly. "Not yet. That letter from Kansas could take a month, and in a month I'll have your ranch." "No, Mr. Pike, you won't." A voice came from the saloon door. Not Caleb's. Maggie turned. Gerald Fisk, the county clerk, stood in the doorway holding a telegram. "This just came in from Hays City," Fisk said. "I took the liberty of wiring the clerk myself after Mrs. Turner visited my office last week. Told him it was urgent. He wired back this morning." Fisk walked to the table and set the telegram in front of Maggie. She picked it up, read it again. Her hands were steady. "The Hays City clerk confirms that the marriage license of Samuel Hale and Margaret Hale, filed 1854, bears the mark of an X for the groom.
No cursive signature exists on any document in their county bearing the name Samuel Hale. She set the telegram on the table in front of Edgar Pike. "There's your proof, Mr. Pike. Would you like to refile your lien now, or would you like to leave Red Creek before I send this telegram to the U.S. Marshal's office?" Edgar Pike stood up. His chair scraped the floor. Langley was already gathering papers, stuffing them into his briefcase, with the urgency of a man who sees a sinking ship and doesn't intend to be on it. "This ain't over," Edgar said. "Yes, it is," said a voice from the bar. Roy Beckman. Every head turned. Roy was standing at the bar, his whiskey untouched, his face the color of old ash. "I rustled them cattle," Roy said. "Pike paid me to do it. $50 to scatter Turner's herd, and another $50 to keep the pressure on." Edgar spun toward him. "Shut your mouth, Beckman." "I ain't shutting nothing. I got a boy who came home yesterday crying because he hit a girl at school over a lie this man told me to spread. My boy hit a 7-year-old girl, Pike, over your lie. I done a lot of things I ain't proud of, but I ain't gonna stand here and—" "You're a fool, Beckman." "Maybe, but I ain't a forger." Roy looked at Maggie. His eyes were wet. His jaw was working. "Mrs. Turner, I'm sorry for what I said at your wedding, for the cattle, for my boy, for all of it." Maggie looked at this man who'd called her a joke 6 weeks ago, who'd laughed at her in a church and spat in the dirt as she passed, who'd stolen her husband's cattle and spread lies that made a child cry. "Your apology is noted, Mr. Beckman," she said. "You can deliver the 40 head of cattle back to the Turner Ranch by sundown, or your confession goes to the sheriff. Your choice." Roy nodded once and walked out. Edgar Pike looked around the saloon. Every face was turned against him. The bartender, the ranchers, the shop owners. Men who'd laughed at Maggie Turner 6 weeks ago, who'd called her names and questioned her husband's sanity. They were all looking at Edgar Pike now with the same contempt they'd once aimed at her. "Get out of Red Creek," the bartender said, "and don't come back." Edgar grabbed his satchel. He looked at Maggie one last time. "You're smarter than your father," he said. "I'm my mother's daughter," Maggie said. "Always was." Edgar Pike walked out of the saloon. He mounted his black horse, adjusted his leather satchel, and rode north without looking back. Howard Langley followed 5 minutes later, heading in a different direction, as fast as his rented horse could carry him. Maggie sat at the table. The telegram was still in front of her. Her hands were still steady. But inside, somewhere deep in the place where she'd carried 3 years of fear and shame and running, something was breaking open. Not breaking apart, breaking open. The way a seed breaks open when it's ready to become something else. She stood up. She walked out of the saloon. Caleb was standing on the boardwalk. He'd heard everything. His eyes were red and his jaw was tight, and he was looking at her the way he'd looked at her when she'd pulled Lucy from the creek. Like he was seeing something he'd known was there, but hadn't fully understood until this moment. "It's done," Maggie said. "I heard." "Fisk sent the telegram. The loan was forged. Pike's gone." "I heard all of it." "The cattle will be back by sundown." "Maggie." "What?" He stepped off the boardwalk. He stood in the street in front of her. Dust and heat and the sound of horses and the whole town watching through windows and doorways. "I am proud of you," he said. "And I should have said that every day since you got here, and I didn't because I'm a stubborn man who don't know how to say things when they matter. But I'm saying it now. I am proud of you." Maggie's chin trembled just once. She pressed her lips together and steadied it. "Take me home, Caleb." He offered his hand, the same hand he'd extended at the altar, the same grip, rough, calloused, steady. But this time, when she took it, She didn't feel like she was stepping into the unknown. She felt like she was stepping into something she'd built. They drove home in silence, but it wasn't the canyon silence of those first days. It was the silence of two people who'd been through a fire and come out on the same side. When they pulled up to the ranch, Lucy was sitting on the porch steps with a chicken in her lap and a scowl on her face. "You're late," she said. "I counted the chickens 4 times. We got 12. Same as this morning. Biscuit didn't eat the fence, and I'm starving." Maggie climbed down from the wagon. She walked to the porch and sat down next to Lucy. The step creaked. "It's over, sweetheart," Maggie said. "The bad man is gone." "For real?" "For real."
And you're not going to jail? I was never going to jail. That was a lie. I know. I knew it was a lie when Tommy said it. I just got so mad. I know you did. Maggie. Yeah? I don't want you to leave. I don't ever want you to leave. Even if bad men come. Even if people say mean things. Even if the whole stupid town laughs. I ain't leaving, Lucy. You pinky promised. I did. And your finger's still on? Still on. Lucy leaned against Maggie's side. The chicken squawked and jumped off her lap. Lucy didn't care. Maggie? Yeah, baby? I love you. 3 words. 3 simple, plain, unremarkable words that a 7-year-old girl said with the same certainty she'd had in that church 6 weeks ago. No hesitation. No qualification. No conditions. Maggie's throat closed. Her eyes burned. She put her arm around Lucy and pulled her close. I love you too, she whispered. More than I got words for. Caleb stood by the wagon. He didn't come to the porch. He just watched them, his daughter and his wife, sitting on the step in the fading light, holding each other like they'd been doing it for years. He took off his hat. He held it against his chest, and he stood there until the sun touched the ridge, because some moments a man shouldn't interrupt, even if he's part of them. That night, after supper, after Lucy was asleep, Maggie sat on the porch. The stars were out. The air was cooling. Somewhere in the east pasture, she could hear cattle. Roy Beckman had brought them back 2 hours before sundown. Every one of the 40 head, driven by Roy and his 2 hired men without a word. Caleb came out. He sat in the chair beside her. I need to say something, he said. You've been saying a lot today. More words than the whole first month. I know. Making up for lost time. All right, say it. He rocked slowly, stopped. I've been sleeping in that room alone for 2 years, he said, since Sarah died. And I told myself it was because I wasn't ready, and that was true. But that ain't the whole truth. Maggie waited. The whole truth is, I was scared. Scared that if I let somebody in again, I'd lose him again. And I figured if I kept this arrangement practical, if I kept it about Lucy, about the ranch, about what needed doing, then I wouldn't have to feel nothing. And if I didn't feel nothing, I couldn't get hurt. And now? And now I watched you walk into a saloon full of men who laughed at you and take apart a man who was trying to destroy us. And I stood on that boardwalk and I felt everything, Maggie. Every single thing I've been trying not to feel for 2 years. Caleb. I ain't finished. He turned in his chair to face her. I don't need small. I never did. I need someone who walks through fire and don't flinch. I need someone who picks up my daughter and runs. I need someone who reads a ledger at midnight because she's fighting for a family she didn't even know she wanted. His voice broke, just slightly, just enough. I need you, Maggie. Not for Lucy. Not for the ranch. For me.
Maggie looked at this man in the dark. This quiet, stubborn, grieving, beautiful man who'd spent 2 years in a house full of ghosts and had finally opened the door. "I've been needed before," she said softly. "Needed for work. Needed for duty. Needed because there wasn't nobody else. That ain't the same as being wanted. I know the difference." "Do you?" He stood up. He stepped in front of her chair. He knelt down, the way he'd knelt beside her in the kitchen after the rustlers, but closer now, his face level with hers. "I want you, Maggie Turner. All of you. Every inch, every pound, every number in that head, and every laugh in that chest. I want you. And I should have said it the day you walked down that aisle, but I was too scared, and I ain't scared anymore." Maggie put her hands on his face, her thick fingers against his rough jaw. She felt the stubble, the heat, the pulse in his temple. "Then stop sleeping in that room alone," she said. He kissed her, not her forehead, not politely, not the way a man kisses an arrangement. He kissed her the way a man kisses a woman he's chosen, fully and finally, with nothing held back and nothing left to lose. Maggie kissed him back, and somewhere in the house, Lucy Turner, who was not, in fact, asleep, pressed her face into her pillow and whispered, "Finally." Maggie woke up in Caleb's bed for the first time, with his arm across her stomach and Lucy's foot in her face. The child had crawled in sometime before dawn, Maggie hadn't heard her, and was sleeping sideways across the bottom of the bed, like a starfish in a nightgown. One bare foot was pressed against Maggie's cheek. The other was hooked over Caleb's ankle. Maggie didn't move. She lay there in the gray light and felt the weight of them. Caleb's arm, heavy and warm across the part of her body she'd spent her whole life trying to hide. Lucy's foot, small and dirty and trusting against her face. This was her family. Not the arrangement, not the practical solution to a widower's need. Hers. Caleb stirred. His arm tightened, then relaxed. He opened one eye. "Mornin'," he mumbled. "Your daughter's foot is on my face." "She does that. Used to do it to Sarah." It was the first time he'd mentioned Sarah's name without his voice tightening. Maggie noticed. She didn't say anything about it. "What time is it?" Caleb asked. "Early. Sun ain't up." "Good." He closed his eye, then opened it again. "Maggie?" "Yeah?" "You're still here. Where else would I be?" "I don't know. I woke up 3 times last night to check." "Caleb Turner, are you telling me you worried I was going to sneak out in the dark?" "I'm telling you, I ain't used to good things stayin'." Maggie reached down and moved Lucy's foot off her cheek. The child mumbled something about chickens and rolled over. "I'm stayin'," Maggie said. "My back hurts, your daughter kicks in her sleep, and this bed is too small for 3 people. But I'm stayin'. We could get a bigger bed. We could. I'll build one. You can barely build a fence, Caleb." "That's hurtful." "It's accurate." He laughed. Quiet, low, still half asleep. But he laughed. And Maggie felt something settle inside her. Not excitement, not relief, but the deep, bone-level stillness of a person who has finally stopped running. The first week after Edgar Pike left was strange in ways Maggie didn't expect. She'd braced herself for the town's hatred. She'd prepared for cold shoulders and whispered insults and the slow, grinding cruelty of people who don't like being proven wrong. What she hadn't prepared for was Gerald Fisk. The county clerk showed up at the ranch on a Thursday morning, hat in hand, looking like a man who'd swallowed something sour. "Mrs. Turner," he said, "I owe you an apology." Maggie was hanging laundry. She didn't stop. "For what, Mr. Fisk?" "For not taking you seriously when you came to my office. You asked for records, and I acted like you was wasting my time. And then you turned out to be the only person in this county who could read a filing well enough to catch a fraud." "I appreciate that, Mr. Fisk." "There's more." He shifted his weight. "The county judge, Judge Hollister in Colorado Springs, he reviewed the Pike case. He's voided the lien entirely. and he's issued a warrant for Edgar Pike's arrest on charges of forgery and fraud. Maggie stopped hanging laundry.
A warrant, she repeated.
Yes, ma'am. Based on the telegram from Hayes City and Mr. Beckman's testimony about the cattle rustling.
Pike's done, Mrs. Turner. If they find him, he's going to prison. Maggie stood there with a wet shirt in her hands and thought about 3 years. 3 years of boarding houses and borrowed dresses and half-eaten meals because she couldn't afford whole ones. 3 years of looking over her shoulder. 3 years of believing she owed a debt that had never been real. "Thank you, Mr. Fisk," she said, "for sending that telegram." "I should have done more sooner." "Yes, you should have." He flinched, but he didn't argue. He put his hat on, nodded, and left. Caleb came around the barn. "What'd Fisk want?" "There's a warrant for Pike. The lien's voided. It's over." Caleb stopped walking. He stood there in the dirt and looked at her, and Maggie watched something leave his face. A tension she hadn't even realized was there, because it had been there since the day she arrived.
A tightness around his eyes, a set to his jaw, the posture of a man waiting for the next blow. It was gone. "It's over," he said, like he was tasting the words. "It's over." He crossed the distance between them in 4 strides, picked her up, or tried to. He got about 2 inches before his back protested, and settled for pulling her against him so hard the wet shirt between them soaked through his own. "You're getting me wet," he said. "You grabbed me." "I'll grab you whenever I want." That's a bold statement for a man who can't lift his own wife. "I almost had you." "You almost broke your spine." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her mouth. Maggie kissed him back with wet hands and a wet shirt and the sun on her neck and the stupid, impossible, ridiculous feeling of being happy. Lucy appeared in the doorway. "Are y'all kissing again?" "Go inside, Lucy." "You're always kissing now. It's disgusting." "You wanted this," Caleb said. I wanted a mama, not a show.
"Go count the chickens."
We still got 12, Papa. They don't change.
"Count 'em anyway." Lucy rolled her eyes with the theatrical precision of a child who has recently learned the power of the gesture, and disappeared. Maggie laughed. Caleb shook his head. "She's going to be a handful," he said. "She's already a handful. She's going to be a force." The second person who came to the ranch was Helen Pratt. Maggie was kneading bread. She'd finally learned to make bread that didn't taste like sawdust, though it had taken 11 attempts and Lucy's brutally honest feedback, when she heard a buggy pull up. Helen climbed down, holding a covered dish. She stood at the edge of the yard like she was approaching a bear. "Mrs. Turner," Helen called. Maggie came to the door. She didn't step outside. She leaned against the frame and wiped flour on her apron. "Mrs. Pratt." "I brought you a pie." Helen held it up. "Cherry. It's my best."
Why? Because I was wrong. About you. About this marriage. About all of it. And I don't know how to say sorry for 2 months of ugliness. So I made a pie. Maggie looked at this woman. Helen Pratt, who'd whispered at the wedding. Who'd told Caleb to his face that he'd lost his senses. Who'd smiled behind her gloved hand while Maggie walked down an aisle of laughter. "A pie don't fix 2 months of ugliness, Mrs. Pratt." "I know. But it's a start." Helen's shoulders dropped with relief. "Can I come in?" "You can come in, but if you say one word about my size, my cooking, or my husband's judgment, that pie's going out the window." "Fair enough." Helen came inside. She sat at the kitchen table. Maggie poured her coffee. They sat across from each other, the thin woman and the fat woman, the town gossip and the outsider, and drank coffee in silence for a full minute. "I was cruel," Helen said finally. "Not just careless. Cruel. And I told myself it was concern, but it wasn't. It was meanness, dressed up in manners." "Why?" Helen looked into her coffee. Because you scared me. I scared you? A woman your size, walking into that church, knowing what everybody was going to say, and doing it anyway. That scared me. Because I've never done a brave thing in my life, Mrs. Turner. Not one. I married the safe man. I said the safe things. I smiled at the right people. And then you showed up, and you were big. In every way. And I didn't know what to do with that. Maggie stared at her. So I made fun of you, Helen said. Because that's what small people do to big ones. We try to cut 'em down. That's the most honest thing anybody in Red Creek has ever said to me. It's the most honest thing I've ever said to anybody. Lucy wandered in, saw Helen, and said, Mrs. Pratt, did you bring that pie to say sorry for being mean to Maggie? Lucy, Maggie said, I'm just asking. Yes, Helen said. That's exactly why I brought it. Is it good pie? It's my best. Can I have some? It's 10 in the morning, Maggie said. Pie don't have hours, Maggie, Helen laughed. Maggie shook her head. She cut the pie. The three of them sat at the kitchen table and ate cherry pie at 10 in the morning. And something shifted in Red Creek that day. Small, invisible, but real. Like a crack in a dam that lets the first trickle of water through. Helen Pratt left an hour later. She shook Maggie's hand at the door. I'm going to talk to the other women, Helen said. The ones who were unkind. You don't have to fight my battles, Mrs. Pratt. I ain't fighting your battles. I'm cleaning up my own mess. She drove away. Maggie watched her go. Do you forgive her? Lucy asked from behind. I'm working on it. Mama, my first mama, she said forgiveness is like splitting wood. You gotta do it even when it hurts. Your first mama was a smart woman. You're my second mama. You're smart too, just different smart. Different how? She was gentle smart. You're loud smart. Maggie laughed. Loud smart. I'll take that. The weeks turned. August burned toward September. The ranch healed the way living things heal, slowly, unevenly, with setbacks and surprises. Roy Beckman came by to repair the east fence he'd cut to drive the stolen cattle through. He brought his son, Tommy. He made the boy apologize to Lucy in person. Tommy stood in front of Lucy, red-faced and miserable, and said, I'm sorry I said those things about your mama, and I'm sorry I hit you. Lucy looked at him with the steady gaze of a child who knows her own power. I'm sorry I pushed you in the creek, she said, but only a little sorry. Lucy, Maggie said, I said I was sorry. I just quantified it. Roy Beckman looked at Maggie. She always like this? She's getting worse. She reminds me of her mama. Which one? Lucy asked. Roy didn't have an answer for that. He finished the fence and left. Caleb sold 80 head of cattle at the September market. Got $3.50 a head because Maggie had told him to hold off selling in July when the price was low and wait for the fall drive when demand picked up. How'd you know the price would go up? Caleb asked, counting the money on the kitchen table. My mother tracked cattle prices for 8 years. Fall's always higher. People buy before winter. Your mother should have run a bank. My mother should have run the territory. But she was a woman, so she ran a ledger instead. Caleb looked at the money. $280. More than the ranch had cleared in a single sale in 3 years. What do we do with it? He asked. We fix the barn roof before winter. We buy Lucy new boots. She's grown out of hers. We put $50 in the bank for emergencies. And we buy a bigger bed. You remembered. I remember everything, Caleb. I told you that. He grinned. What else do you remember? I remember you said you'd build one. I said I'd build one. I didn't say it would be good. Then we'll buy one, and you can tell people you built it. That's dishonest. That's marriage. He laughed. She laughed. Lucy came in and asked what was funny, and when nobody could explain it,
She shrugged and said, "Adults are weird." October arrived with a cold snap that turned the world golden overnight. Maggie woke one morning and felt the bite in the air and thought, "I've been here 3 months. 3 months since the church. 3 months since the laughter. 3 months since a child grabbed her hand and called her beautiful." She'd gained weight. Not much, a few pounds, but enough that her work dress was tighter, and she'd noticed it when she bent to pull weeds. The old shame flickered, brief and sharp, like a match struck in the dark. She was standing in the kitchen, pressing her hands against her stomach, when Caleb came in. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Nothing. You're doing that thing where you press your stomach and look sad." "I don't do that." "You've done it 3 times this week. I notice things too, Maggie." She dropped her hands. "I put on weight." "All right." "That's it? All right?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Something." Caleb hung his hat on the hook. He walked to her. He put his hands where hers had been, flat against her stomach, gentle, deliberate. "This body," he said, "pulled my daughter out of a creek. This body sat in a saloon and took apart a man who was trying to ruin us. This body split wood on its first day here and ain't stopped working since. I don't care if it gains 10 pounds or 100. It's the strongest thing on this ranch, and that includes me." "You're just saying that." "When have I ever just said anything? I don't got enough words to waste 'em." Maggie put her hands over his. "The world don't see it that way."
The world laughed at you in a church, and you walked through it. You don't owe the world a damn thing, Maggie. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. He held her. Not delicately. Not like she was fragile. The way you hold something you know is strong, but also know is hurting. "I'm gonna struggle with this," she whispered. "Maybe always." "I know." "It don't go away just because good things happen." "I know that too." "Some days I'm gonna look in the mirror and hate what I see. And on those days, I'll be here to tell you you're wrong. And Lucy will be here to tell you you're soft like a pillow. And Biscuit will be here to groan when you ride her." Maggie laughed against his chest. A wet, broken, real laugh. "That horse hates me." "That horse loves you. She just complains about it. Like me." "You don't complain." "I complain constantly. You just can't hear it because I do it internally." She pulled back and looked at him. This man, this quiet, stubborn, terrible at building things, beautiful man. "I love you," she said. "I should have said it weeks ago." "You said it in every other way. I was listening." "Say it back, Caleb." "I love you, Maggie Turner. Every inch, every pound, every number in that head." "You already used that line." "I only got so many lines. I'm a cattleman, not a poet." She kissed him. He kissed her back. Lucy walked in, said, "Disgusting," grabbed a biscuit, and walked out. November brought the first community gathering at the Turner Ranch, and it happened by accident. Helen Pratt told 2 women. Those 2 women told 4 more. Somebody mentioned a potluck. Somebody else offered to bring fiddle music. Before Maggie knew what was happening, half of Red Creek was pulling up to the ranch on a Saturday afternoon, with dishes and instruments, and the awkward goodwill of people trying to be better than they'd been. Maggie stood on the porch and watched the wagons arrive and felt something she couldn't name. Not happiness. She knew happiness now, and this was different. It was bigger. It was the terrifying, fragile, extraordinary experience of being accepted by people who had rejected her. Not all of them had come. Some stayed away. Some would never come around. But enough were there. Enough to fill the yard. Enough to make noise. Enough to make Lucy run from group to group like a wild thing,
dragging people by the hand to show them the chicken coop and the garden and the spot where Maggie had split wood on her first day. "This is where she chopped wood even though she didn't know how," Lucy announced to anyone who'd listen. "She got blisters and everything. She's real tough. She's my mama." Maggie heard it. Every time Lucy said, "my mama," something cracked open a little wider in that place inside her chest. Helen Pratt brought another cherry pie.
Roy Beckman brought his wife, who was kind and embarrassed, and spent most of the afternoon apologizing for things Roy had said. Gerald Fisk brought a bottle of whiskey and handed it to Caleb with a nod. Reverend Calloway came late. He found Maggie standing at the edge of the gathering, watching. "You don't look like a woman at her own party," he said. "I ain't used to parties, Reverend." "Can I tell you something?" "You'll tell me regardless." "That's fair." He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "The day of your wedding, I asked you what you saw when you looked in the mirror. You didn't answer." "I remember." "What do you see now?" Maggie watched the gathering. She watched Caleb talking to a rancher, gesturing with his hands the way he did when he was passionate about something. She watched Lucy climbing a fence, while Helen Pratt nervously spotted her. She watched the neighbors, the people who'd laughed and whispered and turned away, now sitting in her yard, eating her food, making an effort. "I see a woman who's tired," Maggie said, "and sore, and probably need to wash her hair, who still can't ride a horse without looking ridiculous, and still burns half of what she cooks, who weighs more than her husband and most of his cattle, and whose knees hurt when it rains." "That ain't what I meant." "I know what you meant, Reverend." She looked at him. "I see a woman who stayed." Calloway nodded. "That's a good answer. It's the true answer. And I learned a while back that true is the only thing worth being." He tipped his hat and walked toward the food table. Maggie stayed where she was. Caleb found her there a few minutes later. He handed her a cup of cider. "You're hiding," he said. "I'm observing." "Same thing." "It ain't the same thing. Come sit with me." He nodded toward the big oak by the fence. "I saved us a spot." "You saved a spot at your own ranch?" Helen Pratt tried to claim it. "I had to negotiate." They sat under the oak. Lucy materialized from nowhere and climbed into Maggie's lap. She was getting too big for it, all legs and elbows, but she folded herself in anyway, the way she'd been doing since the first day at the general store. "I'm tired," Lucy said. "You've been running for 3 hours." "That's why I'm tired." She pressed her face into Maggie's shoulder. "Maggie?" "Yeah?" "Remember when you first came and I said you were real big?" "I remember." "I was right. You are real big." "Thank you, Lucy." "But you know what? The world's real big too. And you fit in it just right." Maggie looked at Caleb over Lucy's head. He was looking back at her with wet eyes and a clenched jaw, and the face of a man who loves someone so completely it scares him. "Where does she get this?" Maggie whispered. "Not from me. I can barely string a sentence together." "She gets it from herself. She gets it from you. 3 months, Maggie. She's been watching you for 3 months. Watching you be brave and loud and honest and stubborn and strong. That's where she gets it." Lucy was asleep. Again. In Maggie's lap. Like it was the only place in the world where sleep came easy. The gathering went on. People ate and talked and played music. A fiddle struck up something slow and sweet, and 2 couples danced in the dirt yard. Helen Pratt pulled Roy Beckman's wife into a reel, and both of them laughed so hard they had to stop. Caleb stood up. He extended his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "I don't dance." "Neither do I." "People will stare." "Let 'em." "Caleb, I got a sleeping child in my lap." He reached down and lifted Lucy, gently, effortlessly, and laid her on a blanket under the oak.
The child didn't wake. She never did when Caleb moved her. Some part of her always knew his hands. He turned back to Maggie and extended his hand again. "Dance with me, Maggie Turner." She took his hand. He pulled her up. They walked to the cleared space in the yard where the other couples were swaying. The fiddle was playing something Maggie didn't recognize, something old and simple and sad in the way the best music is sad. Not because it's about loss, but because it's about having something worth losing. Caleb put his hand on her waist, not her shoulder, her waist. The wide, soft, heavy waist that she'd spent her whole life trying to hide. She put her hand on his shoulder. They danced. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't pretty. A large woman and a lean man shuffling in the dirt, bumping into each other, out of rhythm. Maggie stepped on his foot twice. Caleb apologized the third time it happened, and she pointed out it was her foot he'd stepped on. People watched. Of course they watched. Every person at that gathering turned to look at Caleb and Maggie Turner dancing in the yard. But nobody laughed. Not a single person. Helen Pratt dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Roy Beckman's wife gripped her husband's arm. Gerald Fisk raised his whiskey cup. Reverend Calloway bowed his head, and if his lips moved in something that looked like a prayer, nobody mentioned it. Maggie danced with her husband. She felt his hand on her waist. She felt the dirt under her boots. She felt the evening air, cool now, carrying the smell of food and wood smoke and the last warmth of a summer that had changed everything. "Caleb," she said. "Yeah?" "That day in the church, when Lucy grabbed my hand, when she called me beautiful." "I remember." "I didn't believe her. I thought she was too young to know what she was saying. I thought she'd learn, eventually, that the world don't think women like me are beautiful." "And now?" "Now I think maybe the world's wrong, and maybe a 7-year-old with a missing tooth knew more than all of them." Caleb pulled her closer. Not delicately, the way you hold something you intend to keep. "She's got all her teeth now," he said. "The new one came in last week." "I know. She showed me 17 times. She showed me 22. She loves you." "She loves you more. I've accepted it." "That ain't true." "It is. And it's all right, because I love you more than I love myself. And I figure that evens things out." The fiddle played. They danced. The stars came out one by one, thick and bright over the Colorado Ridge. The same stars that had been there the night Maggie sat on the porch alone and tried to remember the last time someone had called her beautiful. She didn't need to remember anymore. She heard it every day. In Lucy's voice when the child climbed into her lap. In Caleb's hands when he reached for her in the dark. In the creak of the porch step that announced her presence. In the rhythm of a ranch that worked now, really worked, because she was part of it. The music stopped. The couple separated. Caleb and Maggie stood in the yard, still holding each other. "We should check on Lucy," Maggie said. "She's fine. She's asleep." "She's always asleep." "She sleeps because she's safe. You did that." "We did that." Under the oak tree, Lucy Turner opened one eye, confirmed her parents were still holding each other, and closed it again with a satisfied smile. The gathering ended. The wagons pulled away. The yard emptied. The fiddle went silent. Maggie stood on the porch and watched the last lantern disappear down the road. Caleb stood beside her. Lucy was inside, finally in her own bed, sleeping the deep, untroubled sleep of a child who has everything she needs. "Maggie," Caleb said. "Yeah?" "You remember what you wrote in that letter? The one I chose out of 11? "I remember. I am a large woman with no family, no prospects, and no illusions." "You were wrong." "About which part?" "All of it." He put his arm around her shoulders.
You got a family, you got prospects, and you got at least one illusion, 'cause you still think you can't ride a horse. I can't ride a horse. You ride Biscuit just fine. Biscuit walks. That ain't riding. That's sitting on a moving chair. It's riding. It ain't. I love you. I love you too, even though you're wrong about the horse. They went inside. They closed the door. The ranch settled into the sounds of night. Wind across open land, cattle shifting in the pasture, the creak of a house that held a family. Maggie Turner, born Margaret Hale, daughter of a gambler and a bookkeeper, a large woman with no prospects and no illusions, had walked into a church full of laughter and come out the other side with everything she never dared to ask for. A husband who chose her, a daughter who claimed her, a home she'd fought for, and a body that had carried her through all of it, through shame and dust and creek water and saloon confrontations and stolen cattle and forged documents and the long, slow, terrifying work of letting herself be loved. In a town that had measured her by inches and pounds, Margaret Hale Turner had measured herself by the only thing that ever mattered: the lives she held, the ground she stood on, the laughter she refused to let silence her. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.